What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another brand new installment of Renegades Reviews, exclusively here, as always, on the Casa D18 Studios channel. I am your host, the Renegade JJ Williams, and today we're going to round out the Back to the Future trilogy with Back to the Future Part 3, starring Michael J. Fox, Christopher Lloyd, Mary Steenburgen, Thomas F. Wilson, and Leah Thompson. What's up, everybody? Thank you for joining me once again, as always, here on the Casa D18 Studios channel. Here today to round out, as I've said over the last couple of days, quite possibly the greatest trilogy that is not the original Star Wars trilogy. It's November 12th, 1955, and moments after watching the DeLorean get struck by lightning, Marty learns that Doc was sent back to 1885. Marty then returns to the Doc from 1955 and tells him that he is back from the future. Doc passes out from the shock, and the next day, Marty and Doc use the information in the letter that Marty received via Western Union to locate the hidden DeLorean and repair it so that Marty can return to 1985. However, when retrieving the DeLorean, Marty sees a tombstone that Copernicus has kind of taken fond to. The tombstone belongs to Doc, and it's dated 6 days after the date of the letter. According to the tombstone, Doc was killed by Buford Tannen, Biff's great-grandfather, over the amount of $80. Once the time machine's restored, Marty decides to travel to 1885 in order to save Doc, despite explicit instructions not to do that, because you don't want to alter the timeline. You don't want to mess things up. When Marty arrives in 1885, he arrives in the midst of a cavalry pursuit of Native Americans. The fuel line on the DeLorean gets torn, so Marty hides the car in a cave, only to be chased out of the cave by a bear. Marty ends up tumbling down a short cliff and hitting his head on a fence. The fence belongs to farmers Seamus and Maggie McFly, Marty's great-great-grandparents. Marty ends up spending the night at the McFly farm, and the next day he walks into Hill Valley. Upon his arrival, he almost immediately bumps into Buford Mad Dog Tannen and the rest of his gang. Mad Dog and his gang attempt to hang Marty in order to christen the brand new courthouse that they have. But Doc comes in and he rescues him. At first, Doc is a little bit peeved that Marty disobeyed his explicit instructions. However, Doc admits that he's actually kind of happy to see his old friend. Marty shows Doc the photograph of his tombstone, and Doc agrees to leave 1885. Despite being set up as the town blacksmith, despite having lived a really nice life in his older years there, the fact that he's going to die in a few days is enough for him to get out of Dodge. However, without gasoline, the DeLorean can't run. Mr. Fusion, plutonium, flux capacitors, all that's ever done is powered the time circuits. The DeLorean has always ran on regular old gasoline. No gasoline, no 88 miles per hour. So Doc and Marty come up with a plan to use a steam locomotive in order to try to push the DeLorean up to 88 miles an hour. And while Doc and Marty are exploring Shonash Ravine, which in their time will have a bridge completed across it, they overhear a distress call. And they spot a runaway horse-drawn carriage with a woman named Clara Clayton on it. Marty and Doc to the rescue. They chase down the carriage, save the girl. But they alter time a little bit in doing so. Because back in 1985, Shonash Ravine is known as Clayton Ravine, named after a teacher who fell into the ravine and perished. Clara Clayton is said teacher. She was supposed to die falling into the ravine. Doc and Clara fall in love almost immediately. Virtual love at first sight, even though Doc doesn't believe in such. And at a town festival, in celebration of the new clock for the tower, Mad Dog tries to shoot Doc and instigate him, get a rise out of him. Marty comes in, saves the day. He hurls a pie tin made by Frisbee into Mad Dog's hand, which messes up his shot and allows Doc to survive that encounter with Mad Dog Tannen. Buford insults Marty, calls him Yella, ends up challenging him to a showdown in 2 days. Marty accepts because, as we all know from these movies, nobody calls Marty chicken or Yella. Yella is chicken in the Old West. Marty accepts the fight. He can't back down. Doc warns Marty not to get provoked into these things so easily, and he ends up letting it slip about Marty's future accident. The one that we discovered in part 2, which sent Marty's life into a bit of a tailspin. They look at the photograph now, and Doc's name has been erased from the tombstone. Tombstone still remains. So somebody still dies on that date. Just Doc's name is gone. After growing extremely close to Clara and bonding over their love of Jules Verne, Doc attempts to tell Clara the truth about himself, that he's a man from the future and that he doesn't belong there. But Clara feels that he's almost making fun of her because of her love of Jules Verne and his novels like Journey to the Center of the Earth, From the Earth to the Moon, etc. Heartbroken over the fact that Clara doesn't believe him, Doc goes to the saloon to binge some alcohol and gets himself a shot of whiskey, and he basically holds the whiskey the entire night, telling his stories, what's to come in the future to the locals. None of them believe in a word that's coming out of his mouth. Eventually, Doc does his shot, and he passes out from one shot. Doc Brown handles his alcohol about as well as Stat Boy does. Just throwing that out there. Anybody that's ever drank with Stat Boy before, you know it's true. Mikey, if you see this, I love you. Mad Dog arrives the next morning for his duel, calls out Clint Eastwood, which has been Marty's alias the entire time here in 1885. Marty looks at the photograph of the tombstone now, and he sees Clint Eastwood written on the tombstone, indicating that he is now going to be the one to die in the Old West. And Marty refuses to duel. He tries to stall because they're about to get out of town and go back to the future. They're just trying to get out of the saloon so that they can catch their train, complete their mission. Bartender makes some wake-up juice, basically a little bit of everything in the bar, including some Tabasco, all kinds of crazy stuff. And it wakes Doc up right away, but it's just like a reflex reaction. He passes back out, and they say that in about 10 minutes, Doc will be back up fully functional again. Doc attempts to flee with Marty, but Mad Dog's gang captures Doc and forces Marty to duel after all. Mad Dog shoots Marty, but Marty is wearing a makeshift bulletproof vest, very much like his Western hero, Clint Eastwood. Marty plays possum after getting shot, and when Mad Dog gets close, Marty kicks him, gets up, knocks him out into what, ladies and gentlemen? That's right, a wagon full of manure. Repeating the joke for the third film in a row. A member of the Tannen family gets knocked into manure. The law comes in, and Mad Dog and his gang get arrested for a robbery that they had committed a couple days prior, in between the festival and the duel. And then we see Clara, distraught herself by what she feels were Doc's lies. Clara goes to the train station and buys a one-way ticket to the end of the line, San Francisco. As the train departs, Clara overhears a salesman discussing this heartbroken soul that he saw at the bar the night before. Clara asks the salesman a couple questions, descriptive inquiries about what the man looked like. And she realizes that the man he's talking about is her beloved Emmett. Clara pulls the train's emergency brake and runs back to Hill Valley. She gets to Doc's shop, and she discovers a model of the DeLorean and realizes that he was trying to tell her the truth all along. See, women, us men aren't always lying to you when we tell you outlandish stories. Sometimes it's just the truth. She grabs a horse, and she begins to ride after him. Doc and Marty take the locomotive at gunpoint and begin to take it along the switch track, which is the path towards Shonash Ravine. Clara rides her horse towards the end of the locomotive and boards it, while Doc is making his way from the engine to the DeLorean. Doc tries to encourage Clara to join him, but she falls and begins to hang by her dress, which is tearing as each moment passes. Marty passes Doc the hoverboard so he can save Clara, and they coast away from the locomotive just as the DeLorean hits 88 miles per hour and begins to sail across Shonash Ravine. The locomotive falls into the ravine, a glorious, spectacular kaboom. Doc and Clara are safe, and Marty travels back to 1985, where the bridge is complete, arriving safe and sound. Marty arrives on October 27th, 1985, 2 days after our initial journey began, narrowly escaping the DeLorean before it's destroyed by an oncoming locomotive. Marty discovers that the timeline has been restored to its normal self after the destruction of the almanac back in 1955, before Doc was struck by lightning and sent back to 1885. He finds Jennifer asleep on her front porch. They go for a drive, and using the knowledge that he learned about his accident in 1885, refuses a street race when challenged by his friend Needles. When the light changes green, Needles begins to race straight ahead. Marty throws his truck in reverse and speeds backwards, turning around just in time to see that had he raced Needles, he would have crashed right into an oncoming Rolls Royce. Jennifer remembers that this is the accident that sent Marty's life into a spiral, like I mentioned earlier. She opens up the facts that she brought back from the future, and the words "you're fired" have disappeared. Marty and Jennifer go to where the DeLorean has been destroyed, and they examine the wreckage. And a flying steam locomotive appears out of nowhere. On it are Doc, Clara, and their two children, Jules and Vern. Doc gives Marty a gift, a photograph of them standing next to the clock that was about to be installed in the church house in 1885. The same clock that got struck by lightning in 1955. And when Jennifer asks Doc about the facts and the fact that it erased, what does this mean? He tells her that their future has yet to be written, so make it a good one. Doc and his family say goodbye to Marty, depart aboard the locomotive, which takes flight, before disappearing as our trilogy comes to its conclusion. We interrupt this episode of Renegades Reviews for an important announcement about
merchandising.
Merchandising? What's that?
Merchandising. Come, I'll show you. Merchandising, where the real money's made.
Make sure you go over to teespring.com/stores/Jeff Meacham Network for all the t-shirts you see here from the West Coast professor, Jeff Meacham himself. You can get shirts for the Jeff Meacham Network, Talk Wrestling, as well as the red and gold Meachamania shirts. And while you're there, don't forget to get your shirts of the Casa D18 Studios Brotherhood, the Dads on Wrestling shirt, the Renegade JJ Williams, Statboy Sports Bar, and the hashtag StatBoyApproved shirt. Make sure you go over to teespring.com/stores/Jeff Meacham Network and score your shirts today. What a way to end the trilogy. Like I said, quite possibly the greatest trilogy that wasn't the original Star Wars trilogy. And here to conversate with me once again on this chapter of the franchise, none other than the man, the myth, the legend, the West Coast professor, Jeff Meacham.
AKA Rip Van Winkle.
It's not even WrestleMania week yet, sir, and you're already exhausted.
I know this. Well, you have to remember something, Unky J. Let's see, today is the 3rd, so yesterday was a long damn afternoon. So it's I had a 3-hour block where I just kept on going, it felt like. So I'm a little pooped. However, I do enjoy these movies so much. We talked about this. I want to be part of this. We've often said, you and I, that it's 2, 1, 3. I advocate that it's 1, 2, 3 because 1's just the perfect movie. I've gone over it many times. I love this one too. I mean, they talk about in the documentaries that every thread that Bob Gale lays out over the course of these movies, everything gets picked up, everything gets tied into pretty little bow. and it really is a great way to end it. If you believe in the non-canon things, Jules and Vern pop up later, as do Doc and everybody else. So there is that. You and I agree, hot garbage, not so much. So just whew, other than Bill the Science Guy, yeah, that's it. But this movie is so fun. This, we've talked about, the movies we're going to be watching later on in the year and everything, and how they all kind of follow a similar pattern. Like the first one's the best one. The second one's, a little, a little, a little darker, a little more campy, but still enough to pass. And the third one, usually delves into the hot garbage department. Not this one. This one's very, very good. It stands up very well to the other two. I'm a big Western fan. I always have been. My father, my grandfather, both were huge into Westerns as I was growing up. So, every time I would walk in the living room, now for sure. And then when I was at my grandfather's house before, when I was younger, if it wasn't John Wayne on, it was one of the many Western TV shows in the 50s and 60s. So seeing Doc and Marty go into a Western was hysterical.
Well, and that was Michael J. Fox's,
Right.
desire anyways, because they had asked him during the first movie, if you could go anywhere in time, what would you want to do?
Right.
And he told them that he'd love to go to the Old West. Like,
right.
just the thought about being in the Wild Wild West, intrigued him, and they didn't know how they were going to work it, and they ended up doing the third movie all about that concept, and
Right.
very, very beautifully. I want to say that Back to the Future 3 was the first Western I ever saw.
Yeah, I would say that's my reality as well. I will say this: they actually shot this out in Monument Valley, which is where like John Wayne would shoot a lot of his stuff. And I forget the other guy's name now, and it's gonna bite my ass so I watch the documentary for the 4,000th time. But like where they shot the drive-in scene with Doc in 1955 and Marty with that ridiculously constructed time machine thing, and Marty in those god awful Western clothes that were certainly authentic. Okay, this is why Doc is a scientist, not a fashion designer.
I love that Doc made fun of himself though when he got back to 1885. It was like, who dressed you in that? You did.
You did. Dumbass. Just and it's so funny. Like, I found out later the reason Marty looks so dark in the scene, even though he got dragged through the dirt. So you think of it, like Michael got an accidental tan being out in the damn sun so much, so that's why he looks like he's damn near brown when he gets shot off off the lynch and walks back to Doc, because he's been sitting there out in the sun for days and days and got a little cooked. Because Michael is not a pale white boy, but he's definitely pale face compared to some of the guys in the movie for sure. Just the scene in the bar when Doc gets drunk and they have to make him more sober than a preacher on Sunday. By the way, not a whole lot of people know, unless they know the voice like you and I know the voice. Sheriff of Nottingham, baby. Just gonna say it now. He's in that scene. Listen for it.
Pat Buttram.
Hell yeah, baby. Just great. Like those.
I always forget that he's in that movie until he opens his mouth and I hear his voice.
Right.
And I immediately go to the Sheriff of Nottingham.
Yeah, it's funny. Like when I took Dylan to Universal and I did the Scooby voice for Scooby and the Krusty laugh for Krusty, and Dylan did the SpongeBob laugh for SpongeBob, I've never felt compelled to get into the twang when I see the sheriff, but I've only seen him once at Disneyland, to be fair. So,
touche.
May have to revisit that if they ever open up Villains Row again, if we ever go to the damn park again, that is. Yeah, the three people at that table are just like Western legends. Like it's the biggest goose-sized Easter egg in the history of Western movies, like for real. But it's so funny to see those guys there.
Definitely. I mean, they definitely gave the proverbial tip of the hat to the legacy.
Yes, absolutely. So well done. And that's that's Zemeckis and Gale going, respect, dude. That because those guys get it. I mean, Zemeckis is a director's director. Gale's one of the best ever. So it's it's awesome. So
You almost have to wonder if they tried to get Clint Eastwood to make a cameo in the Western scene.
I did hear they tried. I did hear they tried to do that, but I think he was on location far enough away where it wouldn't have been cost effective to make it happen.
Possibly. Because I want to say around the time they were doing this, that he was doing Unforgiven or getting ready for Unforgiven.
That sounds right. By the way, speaking of the Clint Eastwood scene in part 2, I totally forgot this when we did this yesterday. I don't know if you know this. I don't know if we ever talked about this. One of the women in the hot tub with Biff, do you know where she went to later in life as an actress?
Remind me.
The Undertaker's mistress in the 2002 storyline with Brock and Paul Heyman.
No, I didn't know that one.
Tracy Dolly. No shit. When I saw her, I went, wait a minute. Threw on my VHS because my broke ass didn't have the DVDs yet. I went, Mucker Feather, no way. Like, oh my God. And yeah, same person. So I forgot to mention yesterday. So
there you go.
Yeah.
Everything comes back to wrestling.
Talk about a freaking wrestling Easter egg. Like, holy crap.
And then another one that would have been interesting if they had tried to make the connection would have been a lot harder to secure than Clint Eastwood, I'm sure, at the time. Ronald Reagan.
Yeah.
Having had the throwaway line about him being president in the first one.
Right.
And he's an established Western actor.
Right.
His terms as president had come to an end in 90. He is already 2 years removed from office.
Right.
Have him, just as him and Nancy in the background at the festival. Yeah. Dancing.
Yeah.
Would have just been comedy gold.
Yeah, I mean, we've all heard the story of him having to stop the projector because he was laughing his ass off so much at the line in part 1. I think if they had tried, he may have gone for it for very little. So that would have been cool to see Reagan and Back to the Future. That would have been neat. I mean, the fact that he laughed at the movie, the fact that he mentions the movie in his State of the Union the next year, just, again, I told you guys I met Ronald Reagan. He's one of my favorite people I've ever met, regardless of your politics. Decent human being, and it would have been cool to see him in the movie for sure. And Nancy, I adore Mrs. Reagan. I can't say enough good things about both of them. Anyway, I'm gonna get all misty eyed again, like I did freaking yesterday.
No worries. The biggest thing that I want to talk about part 3, and you kind of almost jumped the gun on me when we discussed in part 1. But we need to go into detail here now that the trilogy and the saga has concluded.
Yes.
Many, many, many years ago, and you know this because I showed this to you personally, but many, many, many years ago on YouTube, there was a YouTube video called Santa Claus is a Dick. And it chopped up a bunch of the scenes from Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, showing just how much of a prick Santa is throughout the entire hour-long special. Even up to the finale where, he changes and he becomes, your jolly old Saint Nick again. He still only wants Rudolph because he's of use to him.
Mm-hmm.
This segment of this review is going to be called Doc Brown is a Hypocrite. Because throughout the entire saga, he talks to Marty about disturbing the space-time continuum. Don't come into contact with your other self. Didn't create the DeLorean to profit and personal gain. Part 1, you taped together the letter that Marty wrote you in order to save your ass from getting shot to death by the Libyans. Part 3, you hook up with a girl from the 1800s, bring her back to your time, and not just hook up with her, breed with her to have your own family.
And again,
Marty McFly wanted to make a couple of bucks on betting on sports is bad. And yes, we saw what happened when Biff did it. Big difference between someone doing it for good and someone who is already a dick doing it.
Biff Cannon's dick.
Just saying, Doc Brown's hypocrisy completely on display here. And you don't really notice it the first time you watch the movies through. It's not until you've watched these ad nauseum, like we have, that the little things really start to bubble up to the surface. What do you think about Doc Brown, considering what we know about how much of a hypocrite he is?
I will tell you this. On the extras on disc 4 of Back to the Future trilogy, 30th anniversary edition anyway, there is a segment there called Doc Brown Saves the World. Basically, it's Doc Brown having come back from 30 years after 2015 with items that he himself had allowed to get into the universe that led up to the Mr. Fusions being widespread distribution, and each of them had a little bitty explosive in it, and at a certain time at the end of whatever 2045 at one point, they were rigged off to literally destroy the world. Doc Brown realizes he done fucked up. So his hypocrisy is not unknown to him. It still ain't right. And if you're a fan of the animated series, I'm gonna get with you here in a minute, because I'm gonna be cool with you here right now. Not only does he rebuild the damn car he swore up and down he wanted to tear down in 2/3 of the damn saga, but he takes his kids with him throughout history, and they continually screw shit up every week. Like, dude, destroy your car, settle your ass down. You're smart enough, homeschool the damn kids, have Bill Nye help your ass out, and knock it the hell off. And if you don't want to teach your kids, you married a teacher. Oh, but wait, she has 1800s education, and you're in 1991 because you're a selfish hypocrite. Dude, I really wonder sometimes if Doc went back and got replaced by Jim, the guy from Taxi, for how stupid he is sometimes. Like, for real. And if you don't get that, get the hell out. Thank you.
I understood that reference.
What? Never mind. I'm not gonna do the whole thing from the driving test, because we'll be here till 5:00. Just watch that episode. You'll thank me later. It's Jeff Conaway getting completely twacked out by Christopher Lloyd's shenanigans. Gold. And Jeff Conaway's twacked it anyway, but that's just Jeff Conaway. Anyway. Yeah, I do agree. He's very much a hypocrite throughout this whole thing. And again, the first movie, I will give him, like, if I'm saving my ass, I'm saving my ass. Like, for real. Like, if I have the potential of the Libyans blowing me away, I'm saving my butt.
But not even that. In the first movie, he interacts with his other self. The 1950s Doc that's trying to put together the experiment and asks for the wrench, and he corrects him on the size.
Yeah.
Whereas Marty has to do everything he can to stay away from himself. Here he is having a full-on conversation.
Yeah. He's literally on the walkie-talkie saying, yeah, avoid yourself. Oh, there I am. Hi. Just let me have my back turned.
Hey, how's it going?
Yeah.
I'm you in 30 years. What's cracking, homie?
That's it. It's like,
you're still alive.
Like, brother, I'm sorry. Your hair gets worse if that's possible. I'm sorry.
Great Scott.
Oh, yeah, it's definitely a tale in double standards and hypocrisy. No question about it.
This almost sounds like a stupid question, but do you think they realized it when they were writing it, how hypocritical they were making Doc.
Yeah, I don't know. That's interesting because okay, so here's where I get a little off into the weeds and philosophical about these movies because I adore these. These are my favorite movies ever.
I know.
The guy behind, I think it's the guy behind Rick and Morty that's on Back in Time documentary. He talks about this is the only movie where like your protagonist in the first one, he doesn't have an arc. He's just kind of there, like doing his thing. Part one's about George getting his shit together and the Rain, being a horn dog for her son, which is just awkward and weird.
Although there is an entire genre of adult movies that are based around that theory. So, clearly they were tapping into something in 1985 that would become a thing later on. They just didn't realize it.
The fact you use the word tapping there just makes me want to heave. And we'll over that. So part two is not even really Marty's arc either. Part two is, trying to right the wrong that Marty damn near caused himself in the first place, but it really isn't his story to fix. It's everybody trying to dance around Biff's, complete, destruction of everything around them. Part three is more of, okay, Marty is the guy that has to make things right, and he does. It's funny, we talked all about, Doc and Marty really switch in part three. They even switch catchphrases in part three at one point. Marty's the rational one, he just wants to go home and get back with his girl. And I think that's where Doc gets, up in his own head. Marty gets to go home to his woman, to his family, to his kin. What's Doc going home to?
Einstein.
Well, granted, Einstein's a cute dog. Love Einstein. But he only has something to look forward to because he knows now that his surroundings in 85 aren't going to be the same because the time machine works. So his knowledge of the future, which he's not supposed to have, gives him enough reason to go back anyway. And he still doesn't until he makes sure the girl can come with him. Hypocrisy. Conspiracy. And if you don't get that, why are you on a channel with wrestling people? Come on. But again, I love the movies, every single one of them in their own way. But yeah, Doc becomes a hypocrite. Like the whole thing about Marty being a coward, being thrown into 2 and 3. Like I get the need to give him something to have to bite on, but it's the amount of ways they make it happen. It's just like, okay, yeah, I'm good now. I did like the train thing, the Western train thing, and I enjoy the fact that they're ecological. It runs on steam. They're trying to be good, green for the planet. So that's cool. If you're
31 years ago, before that was cool.
Right, exactly.
We interrupt this episode of Renegades Reviews for an important announcement about
merchandising.
Merchandising? What's that?
Merchandising. Come, I'll show you. Merchandising, where the real money's made.
Make sure you go over to teespring.com/stores/Jeff Meacham Network for all the t-shirts you see here from the West Coast professor, Jeff Meacham himself. You can get shirts for the Jeff Meacham Network, Talk Wrestling, as well as the red and gold Meachamania shirts. And while you're there, don't forget to get your shirts of the Casa D18 Studios Brotherhood, the Dads on Wrestling shirt, the Renegade JJ Williams, Statboy Sports Bar, and the hashtag StatBoyApproved shirt. Make sure you go over to teespring.com/stores/Jeff Meacham Network and score your shirts today.
The fact that all of these movies really, even though they're spread out over 5 years, take place in a 2-day span in 1985, really, they still hold up damn near 40 years later. Yes, Star Wars holds up greatly if you are a Star Wars / sci-fi / fantasy fan. These 3 movies, the Back to the Future trilogy, holds up cinematically, period. They are great movies. Like I said, part 1's damn near a perfect movie. Like, I don't think there's anything wrong with that movie. I really don't. 2 gets a little bit darker than I would like, in some points, especially the deleted scenes. And then part 3 almost is just like the freaking team having an orgy for themselves over being in a Western, like, oh yeah, to be in a West, so that they're all jazzed for themselves. And that's cool, whatever. But they are it remains to this day the best that still is a standalone trilogy, because it's been made clear there will be no part 4. The team went out there after it was released and wore Back to the Future logo with a Roman numeral 4 and a big old thing through it, so it ain't happening. And I love the conviction of the Bobs. Like, it's not happening, it's not happening, it's not happening, and that's great. And they authorized the animated series, and they should be hung in effigy for that. Except for Bill Nye the Science Guy being a thing. I hear the musical actually is really good that they have played over in Europe. So if it ever comes stateside, I'm gonna go see just to see what the buzz is about, because it seems like it'd be pretty cool.
Yeah, definitely. And that just goes into the whole legacy of Back to the Future, and
transitions, yay me.
Which I would definitely be curious to see that too. I mean, I've already seen a parody play,
yes,
based on Back to the Future.
Still one of my favorite days ever.
I miss that theater so much. There used to be, I know because you've been, but I'm talking to the audience here. There used to be a theater in downtown Long Beach called the All American Melodrama Theater, and they would basically put on a parody play every month running on the weekends. So think about your scary movie-esque type of film that makes fun of all the horror movies, but then just rotate that with all kinds of different themes. They did a Star Trek parody. They did a Mary Poppins parody. They did a Back to the Future parody. They did a Napoleon Dynamite parody.
Yeah.
And just all these different things. Unfortunately, that place went out of business long before COVID.
Yeah.
So we can't even blame the last year or so on it.
No, it actually wasn't too long. We went down there for my birthday. I mean, it was really long after that, which is really sad. That was 10 years ago.
But it's a damn shame. We did make some friends down there with some of the cast members.
We did.
But that was definitely one of the best ones that I saw there, yeah. So I would definitely like to see a authentic musical.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
I would like to revisit the cartoons, as bad as they are, just because it's been, 30-something years since I've seen them.
Right. Yeah. People forget they originated on CBS, but they end up also being in a Fox block briefly. Fox is an NBC, Universal. CBS is NBC, Universal. That shows you exactly how much NBC thought of the potential of the cartoon. They didn't even pick it up. So.
But they're quick to release it and make money on it.
Oh yeah.
Gotta draw money.
Yeah. Well, NBC's won't do anything to make money, including cannibalize the WWE Network. Oh wait, was that out of turn? I'm sorry. It's gonna be a long summer. Keith Urban, they shouldn't be together. Anyway,
we didn't do these on the other films.
Okay.
Pretty much because we talked so much that I forgot to.
Okay.
So we're going to go ahead and we're going to do this here.
All right.
Back to the Future, the original, the 1985 Part 1.
Mm-hmm.
What do you give it?
What's my again?
5 stars.
5 stars. Easy 5. Like
Okay.
if I could be Meltzer like and go above it, I would, but I'm not going to be that much of a jackass.
Okay. So Jeff Meacham gives the original Back to the Future 5 out of 5 stars.
Do indeed.
4.5.
Why the half off?
You know, you say it's a perfect movie,
Damn near. Yeah.
and it is damn near. That's why I think I can only give it 4.5, is because it's not quite, but it's damn near.
Well, for what it's worth, I think it's a perfect movie. I just don't want to sound like a crazy person. Like it's, but I do. It is the best movie I've ever seen, ever. And for you Orwellian folks and all you drama critics and film school people, you're on the wrong channel. Shut up, go away.
Yeah, I mean, it is good.
It is.
It's definitely good, but I don't know if I can give it a perfect 5.
Okay. It is.
Back to the Future Part 2. What do you give it?
There will be very few 5s from me, for the record, because I just you have to knock it out of the damn park for me on a movie. As far as Part 2, can I do quarter stars in my things?
You can do half stars, but not quarters.
Okay. In that case, I will do 4.5. I would do 4 3/4, but I would do 4.5.
Okay.
But my official ranking is 4 3/4 for what it's worth. It only doesn't get that last little oomph because it's like Back to the Future 1 was the first one was so good and very like not too whimsical, but Part 2 gets just a little bit too heavy for me. I know it's going to sound cliche coming from Marty's mouth or whatever, but it's almost like it's just so heavy that it weighs the audience down with how bad things get in such a hurry. And it's really like, I mean, granted, if you're a moviegoer, you want to get caught up in the plot, but I'm like, I'm going to it going, oh man, this is rough. Ugh. So, but I do enjoy it very, very much.
I think I'm gonna go 3.5.
Oh wow, that's a big jump
for Part 2.
Okay.
It's a full star down from where I was, so it's not really that big of a drop. I do love Part 2. It was for years my favorite one. I do, after viewing them again more recently, and the whole nine, devouring the trilogy, watching them in recent years, I do tend to go to the original a little bit more now as my favorite. But I think the reason that Part 2 gets so heavy so quick is because they're trying to show you what Doc was talking about in the beginning.
Right.
What happens if you try to change the future? This is what can happen.
Right.
And that's why it gets so dark and so heavy. The whole hoverboard futuristic time, that's always been my favorite part of the second film.
Right, for sure.
Had we seen more of 2015 than what we did, it might have been ranked a little bit higher.
Okay.
I think the fact that we see so many different times in this film is kind of what brings it down a bit for me.
Yeah.
Because it just feels so jumbled.
Yeah. Agreed.
We spend a couple minutes in regular 1985 when Doc comes back and gets Marty and Jennifer, and boom, we're in 2015 for about 20 or so minutes. Then boom, we're back in 1985, but it's not really 1985. And then boom, we're back to the 50s again. It's like, whoa, there's a lot going on here. Slow it down a little bit.
Yeah. Agreed. 100% agreed.
Part 3. What do you give part 3?
Four and a half also.
Okay.
Because it's not part 1. It's not the perfect movie. So the highest I can give. But I love part 3. It's just not as good as part 1. That's really my. I mean, that's really the critique. But that's a tweet. It's not part 1. That's why it gets left. Really that simple for me.
Fair. I think I'm going to give part 3 4 stars.
Oh, okay.
It is, as of recent years, usurped part 2
Oh, wow.
in how much I like it. And I think a lot of that has to do with how into Westerns I got
right
in the 90s. Like I said, I want to say this was probably the first Western I ever saw.
Yeah.
But then on the heels of this, I was introduced to Young Guns 2, Tombstone, Maverick, went back and saw the original Young Guns after seeing the sequel. Purgatory, even Wyatt Earp with Kevin Costner, which, while not as good as Tombstone, is still decent in its own right. But with just how into Westerns as I seem to have gotten in the 90s, they're Unforgiven as well.
Right.
Damn good. Going back and seeing Back to the Future 3 again and realizing that that's kind of where that whole love of it came from.
Right.
I just have to give it a little bit more of an edge. And they calmed it down. It's like you see the little bit of 55 in the beginning,
Right.
where they have to fix the DeLorean. Then it's 1885 and a little bit in 1985 when he comes back.
Right.
The bulk of the film is 1885. Had the bulk of part 2 been like this one, it might have sat a little bit higher for me these days.
Yeah. I part 2 is just the best word I can think about it, because talking about stylizing everything. Part 2 is just so damn busy. Like, it's just all over the damn place. It's still very good, but it is a jumbled mess. It really. I say mess endearingly because I still love these movies, but yeah. It's definitely a little bad shit for sure. So
it's one thing to look on it as a kid,
right,
wide-eyed, and wonder about what could happen in the future. It's another thing to look back on it now that future has passed and be like, meh.
Yeah, exactly.
I kind of said the same thing, the other day on my review of Sci-Fighters that I did, ending out the Movies with Wrestlers month.
Right.
Because the movie was released in 96, but took place in 2009. And it was the first time I had seen it. So, had I had seen it in 96, when 2009 was still 13 years away.
Right.
Ooh, what could be in 2009?
Right.
Seen it in 2021, 12 years after the fact?
Yeah. Although,
and that's not a slight on Piper or the filmmakers. That's more of a slight on me for having seen it so late.
Right. I will say this, though. The 2015 scenes of part 2 are still funnier than hell and fun as hell to watch. So,
true. But knowing that none of that stuff really happened kind of takes away from the wonder and the glory of that particular future.
See, I honestly disagree with what you just said, because a lot of that stuff did come to reality before 2015. A lot of it even did. So, you figure the multi-picture television, the huge wall-long television. You know, a lot of the stuff that we take for granted in 2021 was in 1989's Back to the Future Part 2. You know, freaking
aside from the televisions,
well,
you
okay.
know, we don't have flying cars.
Well,
We don't have hoverboards, real hoverboards.
right.
We don't have restaurants where the waiters speak to you on a TV set and then just magically pop your drink up through a hole.
Right.
You know, we're still very much more the wild gunman in the throwback restaurant than we are the restaurant itself.
Oh, by the way, speaking of Wild Gunman, because you know me when I get in these movies, I get into freaking deep dives. I found out the Wild Gunman was on the Virtual Console, the Wii U. If I can still access that, oh my damn, I'm gonna throw my hat on and go in front of that TV and just blow my weekend away for real.
There you go.
God damn it. It's a baby's toy. It's like, nah, not for me, not for this 80s kid.
And coming from Elijah Wood just makes that even funnier than hell.
Well, Elijah Wood can kiss my ass for his 9 hours of walking. I'll tell you that right now. Damn it.
Make sure you guys go out there on social media.
He's gonna kill me.
Hashtag Casa D18 Studios. Hashtag Renegades Reviews. Hashtag Renegade Returns. Hashtag Jeff Meacham Network. And of course, the ever popular hashtag Shenanigans.
That's it. And since we are doing these movies, I'm going to see if I can get this over to you without a medium a hassle, because Lord knows that's always a problem. I do want to plug the shirt because, I had Greg design this because of these movies.
You mean this one right here?
See, Uncle Jay's prepared.
Yeah, I still have it in my queue here from when you sent it to me the other day.
I love it. Yeah, much like the Meachamania shirt that came early on in the process of this network, much like the Royal Rumble logo centric one he designed for me later, much like the future Kings one, there's the Rumble logo, there you go, much like the Kings centric shirt that came recently, seeing my name with the Back to the Future font, like freaking 7-year-old me is like having a moment, like for real. And then it's on a hat, which me and hats, Christ. So yeah, I am so tickled this is a thing. I can't thank Greg enough. I can't thank my boy Jeremy down at Undecided Printing enough for actually getting me this one in time to wear it down to Adams to sit in the car. Because, geez. I will say this. I did mention to you earlier in our trilogy that I was going to try to get somebody from the team on. I actually contacted Bob Gale's agent. I really wanted to bring Bob in here at the end of part 3. I couldn't get a hold of him, mainly from my own stupidity, because I left a message on the guy's phone and then I went, I don't know my own phone number. Because I just changed my phone. So I'm leaving the message going, and you can contact my assistant, Donna. Her number is. So that's my bad. Bob's not here if that is the case. So I'm sorry. I will attempt to, since you're turning a milestone-ish birthday this year, we will work on something Back to the Future spectacular for you coming up in the hottest damn part of the year, because you have to be born in August and live in California, because damn your parents for conceiving in freaking December, living in California.
Well, as we say on this channel, it is what it is.
Shenanigans were afoot, and it's all good.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us for this magical mystery tour through time and space, known as the Back to the Future trilogy. Until next time, when we input the dates on the old time circuits.
Nice.
And jump behind the wheel of the DeLorean to take another trip into time.
Thank you, Adam, for those, by the way.
I am the Renegade J.J. Williams. This man over here is the West Coast professor, Jeff Meacham, my partner in time. Thank you all, and we will see you guys next time.